That's the last thing you expected to see, an African woman coming on crutches. You expected to see someone marching in majestically with a swag. It is truly an honor to be here at the Massachusetts Women Conference. I'm happy to see a gathering of many women, great and even greater. In Liberia, we say, when the women gather, great things happen. And I'm sure many great things will come out of this conference. My work here is fairly easy because all of the divas have come and blown your minds away. I have come simply to talk about exploiting our collective power. There are two African proverbs that comes to mind when I think about the theme of this conference and think about the power, exploiting collective powers. The first one is, to destroy a broom, once there's a part, you can take one straw at a time and break it. But if you put all of the straws together and try to break, it's difficult to break. The second proverb says, when you want to go fast, you travel alone. When you want to go far, you travel together. I come from a country that I would like to say is a place of many contradictions. Liberia as a country has a history with America where women were taught, or women are socialized to believe that they are loved, they are honored, and you see it happen in public. So seats are given to the girls when the hall is filled, and every other thing is done. But the contradiction, on the other hand, is that as long as you toe the line, as long as you do not do anything to rock the boat or upset the status quo, you're fine. In 1989, our country went into a very brutal civil war, and the women of Liberia did their best from 1989 till 2003. We went to over 24 peace conferences. There were over 14 peace agreements signed, and we still went from bad to worse to ridiculous. So when the war started, it was just the bullets and other things they were using to kill people. But by the time we got to 2003, people were looking for creative ways, including betting on pregnant women to see the sex of their child and degutting them to see who won the bet. In 2003, my sisters and I, a group of ordinary women, came together and we decided to protest. We protested the war, woke up every morning, no slippers, and people used to, I have a friend who said every time she saw us in the street, she would say those women have taken the madness pill. And the madness pill would make us go from the US Embassy to the EU to this other place. And the idea was that the war had gotten to a place where I was 17 when the war started. And when we started protesting, I was 31. So you can imagine how many years of my life, my growth and development, I missed the age of when cell phone was introduced. We missed many things as Liberians as we went to war. And as we fought that war and killed ourselves, and as the women came out and decided to protest, we were called many names. Eventually, we were able to make our marks, and we made peace. Today, the story of the women of Liberia is chronicled everywhere and is used as best example. We are in the Washington Museum. We have Nobel Peace Prize, and there are many other things that has happened for us. But the part of our story that often gets left out is how we exploited our collective power. How is it possible for Christian and Muslim women in this world where our diversity is showcased more than the similarities we possess? How is it possible that women from 16 ethnic groups, who each ethnic group had one warring faction, how was it possible that they could come together to fight for peace? How was it possible for women who had children on opposing sides fighting to come together and say, let peace reign? How were these women able to exploit their collective powers for the good of their community? The first thing was, we decided before we even knew we were going to take on the dictator of our country, that before we could make peace with the world, before we could make peace with each other, we had to look deep down inside and find the powers that we possess within. And that meant a lot of soul searching. And that meant a lot of talking about the dirt that we had absorbed all throughout our lives. You know, I call women sponges. We are the ones that absorb all of the dirt around us. Children drama, husbands drama, relatives drama. We absorb and absorb and absorb, and sometimes to the point of breaking down. You feel so heavy because you have nowhere to squeeze and let out. So that was the situation with us women. A lot of us had been raped and abused and molested, and we were going through it, but we had nowhere to let out. And we knew that we had to find that power, because once we found our individual power, we were unstoppable. The second thing that we had to do was to come together and say to ourselves, this is possible. Let's not look at our status, our social status, our economic status, our religious affiliation. Let's move past all of the things that the world has told us should keep us apart. And let's look at what we think is possible to keep us together. The third thing we did was to now look at our community and say, what is our shared pain? What is that thing that can move us into action, propel us to make history? At that time, we weren't even thinking about making history. When we started protesting, even before the peace talks, we went through a round of fighting in Liberia that the Guinness Book of World Records says Liberia is the only country that has 3 world wars. So the first war, they say the World War I, World War II, and World War III. That's how the Liberians call it, 3 rounds of heavy fighting. After the 3rd round of fighting, the capital city was divided. So one group had the food, another group had the money. So you with the money could not go there if you had some issues like working with government. And one morning, us ordinary women decided we will walk and we will go. It was a 7-hour journey. We walked and got to the place where the rebels were. When we got there and sat down with them to talk about the need for them to open up the roads, they kept looking at us, but as we were going, people kept saying to us, you're going to be killed. But we decided it was better to be killed and let the rest of the country and that area be free than to continue to live in the situation that we found ourselves in. As we got there, we spoke with them. The guy looked at me and said, you all were very brave to cross this place. Weren't you afraid that you would see something else? My answer to him was, as long as you were humans, 2 things. You could either kill us or we would be alive and have a conversation with you. After we left, there was a commitment to open the road. But after that act, many in the community looked at us and said, these are not toothless bulldogs. These are not just ordinary women without a plan, but these are people who have decided to use their God-given talents The world that we find ourselves living in today is an upside-down world. From Syria to Libya, from Iraq to Afghanistan, in Boston, Austin, New York. Everywhere you go, there are problems and crises looking for a group of committed people to exploit their collective powers. And the one question that most times people would say, but I don't qualify. Trust me, there is no qualification for advocacy. All you need is a little madness. And it doesn't take a lot to get you crazy. A few days ago, this is the period of the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence from November 25th to December 10th. And I was reading the papers from Liberia, and the women had done a march. And they marched with 8 symbolic caskets. 8 of those caskets symbolizes girls and babies that had been raped in the most unusual or most horrible fashion. And each of those babies died. Just reading those stories will make you angry and send you crazy. And that's all the fuel you need to propel you into action. The other thing that you will say is that I'm a corporate person and I'm so busy jet setting, I'm so busy doing this, I'm so busy doing that, that yes, I see this problem, but I think it's going to be crazy for me to leave from that top floor and say I'm going to address this problem. Sir or ma'am in this room, if you have that desire, once you put it out, don't be afraid to put it out. People will laugh at you. My children laugh at me every time I give them ideas or say something I want to do. My 15-year-old look at me and say, and the word listens to you? People will laugh. People may say you've lost it, but you will just meet someone who is the most unlikely partner who will tell you, thank you. I've been thinking about this, and I think we can exploit our collective powers. You see, I've been to many places, and I've seen a lot. Young girls, old ladies, boys who are looking for directions. And all these young people, old people are looking for individuals who are not ashamed to exploit their collective powers, make fool of themselves, and change the world. I went to Tripoli, Libya in May, and I really did not understand why I was in Tripoli, because the group that had taken me, I had advocated for them to get a huge grant from the Italian government. And then as a way of showing the Italian government that they were serious, they asked me to go. And they asked me to speak at a meeting where the president, the Supreme Court judge, the justice minister, this room was just filled with everyone important in that country. And the topic that I was supposed to speak on was the role of the women of Libya in the nation's transformation process. We were over 300 in the room, and I could count only 10 women. The speech was useless. So I decided to turn my speech around. 2 things: give this speech and never get a visa to come back to Libya, or keep silent and let the situation of those women continue to go on and on. Let me give you a bird's eye view of the situation that I was tackling. Rape and abuse of women and men from the Gaddafi regime all through the protest. But no one, not in families, not in communities, not in religious institutions, will mention the word rape. I went into that room, everyone who spoke before me said something horrible happened to our women here. They could not verbalize the word rape. And before I speak, most times I would say, Jesus, take me and speak to me. And this time I'm sitting there saying, oh, Jesus, now you have to say something. I get up on the stage and I start a whole conversation about rape. You could drop a pin. And I kept kicking myself and saying, you've done it and you're never coming back here. Afterwards, I went back to Liberia. Two weeks later, I got a call from Italy, and they said to me, Leymah, we want you to see a newspaper from London. The Justice Minister of Liberia went home that night, sat down, and drafted the first ever rape law that makes rape a war crime, and everyone who had suffered from the Gaddafi regime, including women, would be compensated, and anyone caught or a known rapist would be treated as a war criminal. It has passed several stages. And it is waiting for the final passage. I go to Sri Lanka right after the government claimed victory over the Tamil Tigers. And no one would talk about, everyone was talking about reconciliation, but no one was talking about those mothers who knew nothing about where their children were. I had gone in solidarity with my sisters. We went from one region to the other. And as we went from place to place, the stories of pains of mothers who didn't know where their sons were, boys who had been taken from school by the government, children who had just disappeared. On the last day of my trip, I always save the best for last. We were in this room with members of the parliament, government, ambassadors, and everyone. And I told the government, it's time for you to stop gloating about your victory. It's time for you to be serious about reconciliation. And it's time for you to start giving answers to family. I walked out of that room. The ambassador from Great Britain walked over to me and said, you're never, ever getting a visa to come back here. But that was a conversation that needed to be opened up to the public. Yes, you've won a war, but what about the answers to these many questions? Today, the world is asking the government of Sri Lanka not just to answer to those questions, but to also answer about the crimes, the heinous crimes that they continue to commit against young people who they've taken and said they've placed into rehabilitation. I'm telling you these stories because when you go crazy, when you lose your mind about something you're passionate about, not only do you change societies, not only do you change the perception of people who have lost all faith in the ability of this world to do any good for its people, but you make others brave to stand up and speak. Imagine if everyone in this room found the most unlikely partner and decided we're going to exploit our collective powers to bring a change to our community. And sometimes when you talk about exploiting collective power, people have this grand idea of you have to do big things. But you see, The world has lost so much faith in people's ability to do good that sometimes even the little things that we do means a lot more to someone in a community. When you help a mother with her baby going on a flight, when you help someone with a crush like myself, when you help some old person cross the street, that is giving them faith in the ability of this world to do good. Our world is upside down. The questions we have to ask ourselves, if we amass everything, the wealth and all of the beauty for ourselves, and leave half our world in doubt that there is any good left in anyone, will we ever make it? I say no. I believe that each and every one of us in this room have some power. And my word to us, let's exploit it and let's turn the world upright. Thank you.